My name is Ryan Field, Application Engineer with CATI in our Cleveland, Ohio office. Today, what I wanted to talk about was mates inside of SOLIDWORKS and using those more efficiently. So we're all familiar with mates, right? We use those in our assemblies, and they help us really create those nice, powerful assemblies that we can get. That once we have those, right, we can evaluate our models, like doing interference detections and evaluating for clearances and collisions, stuff like that. But that's sometimes it's a lot of components, a lot of things. That can take a lot of time mating those up. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Was just under 3 different topics here. How we can more efficiently and use the mates that we have and use them more efficiently. First off, I've talked about 3 main categories here. First is just in the speed category. Like those standard mates that we use all the time, just quicker, maybe better ways of using those. Then get into a power section of our presentation is really just those advanced mates when the standard mates maybe aren't quite what we need, right? Not quite enough. And finally, some innovation. Look at one of these, a newer mating option that we have called magnetic mates for certain applications. We'll get into those. So starting off with speed, right? Efficiently adding mates, right? We all know, I'll go up into the command manager, click on the paperclip, right? We have those standard mates that we all know and use, like coincident and perpendicular, concentric, stuff like that. We know how to use those, click around and, click the faces or whatever we want to, the selections that we want to mate to. We want to talk about using those a little bit more efficiently. We're going to do that with 3 different topics here. First, utilizing the context menu. Then taking that a little step further, automating the creation of some of those standard mates with smart mates. And then going even farther than that, building those indoor model with our parts with mate references. All right, so jumping over here into our model over here in SOLIDWORKS, you have this like stove layout here. And see we have some burners and some like knobs we want to put in. It looks like pretty easy stuff to mate. And the first one, let's just do sort of that standard way, right? We would do it. Right? We just want to make it concentric and coincident to the holes there. And we go all the way up to our command manager, click on our paperclip, right? And we can make our selections, right? We see those standard mates there. And we go ahead and just select the faces that we're going to mate here. SOLIDWORKS does a good job of guessing what we want to do, right? It says, but we can change that if we want. We'll choose a concentric mate. We can lock that if we needed to. And we can go on and add our next mate in, right, with the mate option still open. Next, we'll add those faces in and make those coincident. Right? Pretty easy, right? But that's a lot of clicks, a lot of mouse movement that maybe we don't need to do. Now let's do that again with the context menu. Right? Another pretty easy method, but a lot less clicks and clicks, I guess we'd have to do, is utilizing the context menu with the control key. Right, so I hold down control and I can basically pre-select my options. Right, I select my options, I'll get a context menu that pops up. And as you see here, it's to help us minimize our mouse travel. So if we move our mouse, it's going to go away. So if that's a habit you have, maybe stop doing that if you want to use this context menu. But we make our selections, and based on our selections, right, there's our options that we can do. You can go ahead and easily click on the concentric option there that was highlighted. You guessed on that one. And we can go ahead and add our next mate. Now we could do it the same way for the coincident mate there, but I want to jump over into one other option that we have here called the component preview window. So I click on that component and open it up and click on the component preview. It opens up in another window. I can freely spin that around without worrying about what's going on in the assembly there. Right, so I select that face and it highlights over in the model. Just hold down control, can use that context menu to add that new component in. Right, if there's already mates and stuff, or it's hard to reach faces. Next thing we can do is see how we have this part here that it can still spin. Right, we didn't lock down any mate references or any concentricity there. I'm going to utilize breadcrumbs to see at a hierarchy of my selection that I made. And one of the things that we do have access to with the breadcrumbs is the mates. So just barely moving my mouse at all, right, I can access that that concentric mate, go in there, lock the rotation, and lock down that movement of that mate and of that component there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that component out because we're going to add that in now the next way, utilizing the smart mates. So I opened up the part file. This time, what I'm going to do is go ahead over and tile our files open here. And when I do that, I'm just going to grab the face that I want to mate. Right? So whatever here, we'll go ahead and grab that bottom face. And as I just drag that over into the model, looking for something to mate to. Right? You can see that symbol there. It looks like those two planes with the arrow. Right? I drop that on there. There's that menu bar. Right? And choose coincident. Add that mate in. Right? Just by dragging it over. I'm going to undo that there because I want to use a unique option that we have in this particular case where we have like basically a shaft going in a hole. I'm going to grab that edge between the planar and the concentric face. And as I drag that over, so we get that like it's called a peg and hole sort of option there. So as I drop that in, right, what it did is actually, let me maximize this file over here. It added both those mates in for us. It added the concentric mate to the hole and that coincident mate right to the face there. So it added two mates in at the same time. And also click on the view mates option there to sort of see the different mates that we've added or that are related to that component there. All right, so what if we have our part already in the model, right? If we don't want to go ahead and open that, right, that might, extra time that we don't really need to do there. When we have the file or the part already in the model, right, I can't grab on it and drag it. We know that's not going to automatically snap to anything. But we can activate that smart mates using the Alt key. If I click on Alt, and I'm going to grab that edge, as I start to move the component, it turns transparent like the first one does when we're mating. And I can let go of Alt at that point. And then I can drag it around, and it's looking for those faces to mate to. Right? I can hit the Tab key to flip that reference if I want to, and drop that in there and get both of my mate options now on, or both of those mates added to that component. So utilizing smart mates inside of the assembly as well. All right, so next we have these knobs we want to put on. It looks like it's the exact same thing that we just did, right? We can, same mates that we need, so we can use either of those methods, right? We'll just do a control drag over, or alt drag to get our, to access the smart mates. But this is a common part we use in a lot of our designs, so we can take this a step further with these mate references. So as I open up that file, I'm going to actually build that mate reference into our model. So it's reference geometry, as we see there. And when we check on that feature, see we have the option to choose our reference entities. We can do tangent, coincident, concentric, parallel, different alignment options that we have. But I'm going to go ahead and just set it to default and choose that common edge between the cylindrical and the planar face there. It adds a mate reference folder to the file. You see that mate reference is added. Now I'm going to go ahead and then just save that. And when I come back over to the model, I can eliminate that step of even having to have the parts open. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just delete those other two out and just go over here into File Explorer. I can drag that part in, that mate reference, it's looking for something to mate to. I can just drag that in, drop that into place there. Now I've added those two mates that utilize that peg and hole option, added our concentric and our coincident mate. So now we have all these parts that can spin, and maybe we want that, maybe we don't. Right? We saw how we can go in and lock down one of those individually. But we do have an option to lock concentric rotation to our components if we need to. You can see it added that little filled in blue dot there. Except for on that one, that's because that part was already fully defined other ways. So it locks all those that are applied to the components that can still spin freely in there. It was a really easy way to lock all those other ones down. Speaking of that, it was new in 2019, was this option to lock the rotation of new concentric mates to toolbox components. So we can, if you have that option turned on, those new concentric mates added as we bring in toolbox components can automatically have the rotation locked down if that's something that you want to do as maybe as part of your standard practices or whatnot. You can eliminate that step of having to do it yourself. All right, so there's three options for adding in those standard mates. Right, the context menu, right, we're utilizing the control key to pre-select essentially our faces, and then that menu bar that pops up with the options based off of our selections that we chose. Smart mates, automates those standard mates. We can either do it with the open document there as we dragged it in, or use the Alt key if the component is already in the assembly and drag those into position there. The nice one there is that peg and hole option where we can do the two mates at once. And then taking that step even further, those predefined, like those common components, like that knob we had there, where we can build those mate references into the files, and then we don't even need to have them open. We can just drag those into the assembly, and it'll look to add those mate references. All right, a couple other just the efficiency things that we saw there as we're working through that assembly, right? The breadcrumbs. They're really nice, not just for mates, right? But that hierarchy of the selections that we made, right? Our mates are available, but you can see we can access a lot of different things through those breadcrumbs. So those have been around for a few years. If you don't use them, they're very handy. Maybe take a little bit of time getting used to, but I'm a big fan of those now. Then that component preview window, right? Right, to access hard-to-reach faces maybe instead of having to break mates and move things around. Maybe, this could be a nice way to access faces that you can't quite get to. And then the command manager, right? We don't need to go up there and select on that, right? With these options that we've chosen. With these different options, we can access those mates a lot better than doing a lot of mouse travel and going up into the command manager there. All right, so our second topic we want to talk about here is some of those advanced mates. It's that next tab down under the standard mates there. You can see there's several of them that options that we have. A couple of ones that we're going to talk about here today. The profile center mate, the width mate, limit mates, and slot mates. Slot mate is actually under that other tab down there, mechanical mates, but if you don't see that on the advanced mates, that's where that is, underneath the mechanical. To go through these really quickly before we jump over and see them in action, right? The profile center mate is going to center align geometric profiles. Right, so if we take a look at some examples here, it's basically generally circular or rectangular parts. You can see some of them have holes there. The group on the left are the available ones. The group on the right, we can't do, right? You see some like chunks are missing out of the corners or whatnot. Not able to use the profile center on those type of profiles. Width mate basically is going to constrain a tab between some planar faces there. We're going to have different constraint options that we're going to be able to use. We'll see when we jump in here. The limit mates constrains our movement in a given range that we define. And the slot mate basically contains the movement of a cylindrical face, right, or like a bolt, right, within inside of an arc. Could be a linear arc, could be a straight arc, or a linear slot, or an arc slot. All right. So coming back over here into SOLIDWORKS, we're going to open up a different model here. We have this sort of mounting mechanism here, or mounting assembly. We have some mates that we still need to add in. Right? Maybe this bracket here, we want to center that shaft on in that hole there. So instead of going up and clicking mates to go out to those advanced mates, we're going to hit the S key, access the smart mates from there, right? Saving that travel going up there. Under advanced, I'll select on width, and I have two options to choose from, right? Or to fill in the width and our tab selections. So for the width, I'm going to choose my outer constraints there. For the tab, I'm going to grab those two interfaces. And you look under the constraints under our option there, right? It's centered. We have some other constraint options to choose from. Free to essentially go within the extents of our selections there, or offset with a dimension or a percent. Right, essentially see 50% there centered, and then we can define different values, right? Based off of, you can see off those different ends where it's defining those, where we can flip the dimension to redefine where that essentially offset is being defined from. I'm going to go back and let's make that free, and we've added that really nice width mate in there, kind of centered those parts up. Now try to move that around, and right when we have mates that have a lot of or assemblies that have a lot of mates, it's kind of tough to get in there and move stuff around. Okay, we'll kind of control those. So I'm going to use this temporary fixed group option, right, to kind of constrain that movement so that I can see exactly what it is, see the motion that I want to see. By fixing that one group, that one component there, I can go ahead and move and see that, essentially that mate, the width mate constraints there that we added. I'm going to delete out that mate because I want to add it in another way. That context menu that we talked about earlier, there's other mate options that are available on there, and one of them is the width mate. It's really nice, really big time saver here that, right, I select those 4 faces. The only option that pops up, right, with 4 selections is that width mate there. It was centered, but we can go into our breadcrumbs and go ahead and change that back to free really quickly there. So it's nice having that option available right on that context menu. All right, our next mate let's look at is the profile center mate. And we're going to center, basically stack these 2 plates here. Right? I'm going to go into the advanced options there and choose that first face, and then select other here and grab that face behind there and actually center aligns those. Some other options we have, you see we can do some rotation of those on those rectangular faces. We can do an offset, flip that dimension if we need to. So go ahead back to 0 here. Just like that, we've locked down that face, right? Since it's centered on there, geometrically centered, right, I can change this, the height or the position there, and that's going to sort of stay with that component. Go ahead in and just change that back really quickly. And as we saw in those graphic earlier, right, we can do cylindrical faces as well. What we can also do with this profile center mate is use that on the context menu too. I'm just going to control select these 2 edges. As I do that, there's my profile center option. I can do my offset if I need to. I can lock the rotation. Say OK. And with one mate there, locked, fully defined that bolt that we've added in. So really powerful option with this profile center mate. All right, coming up here, the next mate option that we want to talk about is the slot mate. I'm going to go ahead in and just do that temporary fixed group option again, just to see, right, we want to lock down that arc there. We want to put that bolt, find that within that slot. So we're going to get our S key again to access our mates, and now down under the mechanical mates, we'll select our slot. It's going to select the face of the arc slot there, and then the cylinder of that bolt. And you see, the wording is a little bit different, but it's basically those same options we had with the width, right? With free, center, distance, or an offset there. I'm going to go ahead in and set that to free, and I kind of contain that movement of that cylindrical face within that slot. As we move that around and let that free, it's going staying within that slot there. And really easy, again, to access that, to make any changes. Right, let's just go back in and maybe change that to a position. I can use our breadcrumbs, access that slot mate. And let's maybe just define a different constraint here. Just define it as one of the other options here. All right, our last mate option let's look at is the limit option. It's going to sort of constrain our movement within our range that we choose. I'm going to go ahead in and just choose the limit angle, choose these 2 faces here. In our case, we got the 30 degrees that we wanted, but if you get a number that you weren't expecting, sometimes it's from a different quadrant there. So we have the option now to choose this pivot reference vector. Or if I select that face there and see I can choose the different quadrants I want. We happen to be in it, the one we wanted here in this case, but we can set that quadrant. I'll just go ahead and define my min and max values here and accept out of our mate, of the mate. Go ahead and fix this component. We can see that motion that we put in there, that we defined in there. When editing the limit mates, we do have this option to, right, we know we can just click on it, get the dimension to pop up there. We can also, by clicking on that, access the max and min conditions as well and modify those right from the graphics area there, so eliminate having to go into the mate tool itself and accessing that. Or the mate feature itself to make those changes. All right, to sum up those 4 mate options that we talked about, right, that profile center just is going to center line those geometric profiles. Fully defined, we can fully define it in one mate there. A really powerful tool. Constraining the tab between the 2 planar faces with the width mate. And actually, the tab can also be one cylindrical face too, if you wanted. We have the different constraint options, right? Centered, we can have it centered on there, free to float within the constraints, or an offset with a dimension or a percent there. And the angle mates, or the limit mates, sorry, can be angular or linear, defining those within the defining that range of values. And constraining that component within a slot, in the wording a little bit differently, but essentially those same 4 constraint options, being centered, free, dimension, or percentage there. And again, don't need to go up into the command manager, right? The ones that we can still get into the mate feature if we need to, right, with the S key, right, where you can add that to your S key if I think it should be there by default, but if not, you can add that and access that instead of having to go up and select on that every time up in the. All right, our last topic here we want to talk about innovation is that magnetic mates, right, where they can be used within, it's kind of a specific feature, but it's really cool if you need to do stuff like this, like a facility layout, or maybe like an office type layout, something like this. They can come in really handy. And jump over here into SOLIDWORKS. We're going to go ahead and open up that office area there. And when I do that, right, if we were just building this assembly, right, we would have to go in and, to fully define that, make that, probably put 3 coincident mates in, right, on the bottom, on the side, on the right, to define those components together. In this modular type design, maybe we'd want to move it around, or we want to add more of them in, right? That's a lot of mates, a lot of zooming in, zooming out that we have to do. With magnetic mates, it's a lot easier, right? You can see here, I can drag those components around, and they look for other connection points to snap to. You can easily just move that around within the assembly. Let's go ahead and add another one in. Really easy. We just kind of drag that asset in, and it's looking for those other, just to snap to those different connection points. We can toggle between the different ones with the open and closed brackets to go back and forth between the moving and the stationary components. We just let go, snaps into place, and a little button pops up that we can lock that mate if we want to. Now those do show up over in our mates folder. You can see here it looks a little different. It's got the magnet symbol. And we can go in and have the little dot in it for the locked one, and we can go in and unlock that and move that. Go ahead and move that one around again. Go ahead in, right? And if we have this modular design, this could be like a plant layout too, right? If you got conveyors and robots and stuff like that, you want to lay out a facility, something like that. I drag in another component here. We can easily move these things around. We can have multiple ground planes. Right, we had one ground plane active there that, how it knows where to define the bottom there. That's defined within this assembly. But I can go ahead in and switch to a different ground plane. I'm going to bring in something to add to the top of the model here, or the top of the table, rather than that little, say, computer monitor maybe. And I just position that in, toggle between the different connection points, and we can position that. Pull it and drag it, let it snap between the different options here, options we have within the mate, and snap those into place and move those around nice and easily. All right, so that was easy to do, but how does it know to do that? Right, those are things that we have to build into the model itself. So I'm going to go ahead in and open up this assembly here just so we can see sort of how those are built. So under Tools, right, we can access that through the Asset Publisher here. We already have one started, so you see we have the Publish References feature there. You can edit that. You can see there's the different connections we have. At the top, first thing there, we have our ground plane. We can do an offset if we need to within this asset. And it's easy enough to add. I'm just going to select that edge and then a face for the direction. If you select an edge, it'll go to the midpoint there. The key thing there was to click Add Connector. If you don't, it does not add it. Something you need to add. We've added that other connector. Maybe if there's geometry on there that we don't, maybe we want this to be offset. Doesn't want it to be aligned to that edge there. Or we can add in some other geometry as well to use. So I'm going to create that offset plane there, and then I'm going to convert that bottom edge over. I'm just going to convert that entity into that new plane, or into that new sketch that we created. I'm going to utilize that to add another asset in, right? So this can be offset if we need it. I'm just going to edit that. Come over here, I'll select that endpoint. If it uses a point, it uses the point. We can flip the direction there for the face. And then I'm going to add that connector in, and we've added another connection point in there. We'll go ahead and save it, and we can go back over now and add that into our model. So let's grab that monitor mount that we have, and as I drag that, find that over here and drag that in. Right, see, we can toggle back and forth again between our connection points. See that little pop-up menu that showed up there? We can do the static or the moving component. I snapped it in. See, this time it was use that connection point that we just created, and it's offset from that edge there, or from that connection point. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and just move this back over. Right, I can grab this and grab a different connection point and snap that into place. All right, so we've talked about this being like a facility layout or something where this could be, that could get really big. Lots of robots, lots of conveyors, stuff like that, or a huge office, right? Those assemblies can get really big. So these assets have the ability to utilize speed packs. If you're familiar with those, we can utilize those within these assets. You can see it creates that speed pack configuration. So basically the only faces we have available are the ones that we use for the magnetic mate. Now that I've activated that really easily within that asset, I can come back over here into our model, and I'm going to activate those speed pack options. So grab our monitor mount. Within our speed pack options, I'm going to use the speed pack. You see as we hover over the part, right, I can only see the faces that I need. Let's go ahead or I can only access those faces that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that to the other one here. Find that monitor mount and do the same thing. Go into our speed pack options and use the speed pack. And as we drag across there, right, you can see I can still access those faces, but it's utilizing that speed pack configuration with assembly. So really nice use of these. If you're doing something like a facility layout, or we have those sort of modular type designs where you can move things around, it saves a lot of time over zooming in, zooming out, adding all your mates, maybe having to move components, stuff like that. So it's a really cool option that was added in a few years ago. All right, so within this layout option, right, with the magnetic mates, right, we can replace those standard mates as we just mentioned, right, with we can have that flexibility to move those around and not have to zoom in, zoom out, and take advantage of the speed. They can take advantage of speed packs as well, right? So we can help bring down the, improve the performance of our large assemblies. All right, to sum up here really quickly, right? Our first topic we talked about was speed, right? Adding in those standard mates, different ways, right? Whatever works into your workflow, whether it's the context menu, using control key, the smart mates, dragging them in from a different file, or using the alt key, or building in those mate references if that's possible, right? And you don't pretty much don't have to go up into the command manager, right, to grab that mate tool. When those aren't quite enough, right, we have those advanced mates that we talked about. There was a bunch of other ones in there as well that we didn't cover in this this session here today, but a lot of other advanced mechanical mates that can use instead of, if those standard mates aren't getting us what we need. And that facility layout option, right, utilizing magnetic mates, building those assets, right, for that modular type design, or being able to take in place and move components around. A really handy tool for anyone that needs to do that type of stuff. Okay, so those are the topics that I wanted to touch on here this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you guys are joining us from. I want to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Well, at this point, Ryan, I don't see any questions. I'll keep my eyes on the chat, but I want to say thank you very much, and you have reminded me how useful profile center mates are.
I was really happy when that one came out. I think it was 2015, maybe. I think that's been around for a couple years now.
Yep, they've been in there for a while, and I find myself falling into old habits of 2 or 3 mates, and I could do a profile center mate many times in one shot to finish it. So, a question came up about the mate controller. No, we did not cover the mate controller today. All right, I think we're good on the question side. I'll keep my eyes open for them if anything does come in. As we wrap up, again, I want to say thank you, Ryan. That was fantastic as always. Really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys all for attending.
I just want to mention a few of the webcasts that we have coming up for the rest of the month, and really mention the DI month webcast series in October. So we've got a catapult session in mid-September for all the various free express tools. Go over those. Some new high-powered Stratasys functionality on September 24th there. And then again, every single day in the month of October, we are going to have a SOLIDWORKS or simulation or 3D printing tips and tricks type webcast. So I definitely recommend everyone check those out. They were extremely popular last year, and because of that, we're definitely doing them again. And we've got some really, really good content that we're going to be sharing with everyone. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really, really appreciate your attendance. If you have any ideas or questions or anything like that, send them in on the chat. I'll keep tabs of that, and enjoy the rest of your day.